The Legend of the Phantom. The Story of the Phantom, the Ghost Who Walks. Written by Jacob Nelson. Original Phantom character by Lee Falk. Prologue. Straining against the wall, the masked man pushed against the heavy stone door. Set into the wall, it seemed a natural part of the cave, unrecognizable unless one knew it was there. The more he pressed, the more the stone gave and slid. A crack appeared along one side. Slowly, the crack widened until it was large enough that he was eventually able to get a finger hold in it. Exerting all of his strength, he slowly pulled it open enough to step inside. The dust of centuries left a fine carpet across the floor. The fixtures and the artifacts inside. Lighting a torch, he found himself inside a room filled to the brim with treasures of every kind. He quickly scoured the expanse and saw that it extended some distance out beneath the sandy floor of the desert above him. Slowly, he circuited the room and finally returned to the center of the cavern. He had seen the covered podium placed in a position of importance in the middle of the cave and wondered what it contained under that cloth covering, but left it to the end of his examination of the area. Carefully removing the dust-covered linen that shrouded the item beneath, he discovered a large tome, bound in hard leather, with vellum pages. Lifting the book, he read the first entry. Friday, 21st of September, 1492. My name is Christopher Columbus, named in part after my uncle, and in part after Saint Christopher, the patron saint of sailors and travellers. But I go by Kit, a name which I have been called since I can remember, a name that honours my mother's English heritage. Recently, my uncle asked me to be cabin boy on the ship Santa Maria. The purpose of the trip is to find gold. That, and a new route west to the Spice Islands. Though I am nearly old enough to be enlisted as a sailor myself, he insisted that he have someone he could trust by his side. How could I refuse? But before I could accept, he told me that if I decided not to take the position, he would give it to Pedro de Toreros instead. However, I told him I was honoured by the post, which pushed Pedro to the Pinta, and since then have worked hard to show that I am grateful for it. His heart skipped a beat as he took in what he had read. Could it be? He wondered to himself. Quickly, he flipped to the end of the book. His heart pounded as he found the final entry, clearly written in a different hand than the rest of the book. My life began anew on the 17th of February in the year 1535, the day my father was murdered. The sea fog engulfed them. Despite his ever-growing concern for his son, Christopher, known as Kit in his youth, heeded to the safety of his crew and ordered the sails lowered to half-mast as the ship slowly sank into the thickening mist around them. Shortly, even his crew were difficult to spot. There they drifted along for half an hour while they waited for the fog to lift. With every second wasted, Christopher's impatience grew. The emergence of a stiff wind blew past, and as the sails billowed, the fog thinned with it. "Ships!" shouted someone from the main deck. Before they could even be identified, Christopher knew who they were. Sing pirates. And they had his son. Christopher realized he had no means to outrun them, and frankly, he didn't want to. Like a wild boar caught in a snare, he was going to give it his all, come what may. The lifting of the veil of sea fog from before their eyes allowed the Sing to spot them as quickly as they were spotted. Ships were ordered to maneuver into position. Then the flag dropped and the crack of cannon fire sounded as the waves of sound bounced off of Christopher's ship seconds before the blast hit. Men flew like matchsticks, railings shattered, and those not caught in the cannonball's path were pierced with shards and splinters of wood and metal. The sudden surge in motion caused the few that were standing to drop to the deck. Those that were dead or supporting themselves unsteadily by the broken railing shortly found themselves without sure footing and slid off the broken side into the water. Then, as quickly as the sound had dissipated, their cries cut through the ensuing silence as it filled the air again. A few were caught unaware during a game of chance, a sport that was expressly forbidden during working hours. A dozen of these men were brutally butchered during the opening salvo, like a bolt from the blue dispatching their souls to their final rest. The wind that pushed their back died at that moment, and they were stuck to fight where they were. To battle! Return fire! Two of the pirates hauled up young Kit to watch the destruction of his father's ship. It was at that moment that Christopher saw him. "Son!" he called across the waves. Yet Kit was too far away to hear his father's voice. One of the two men that had dragged the young man to the deck allowed his attention to be momentarily diverted from the captive in his arms. Kit used that split second to step into the instep of the other, temporarily crippling him. As the diverted man turned back, Kit twisted and hit him hard on the nose with the palm of his open hand, giving him an upward blow. The blow forced a sliver of the nasal bone cavity into the man's brain, killing him even before the man had time to drop to the deck. While the pirate's body fell, Kit sprinted forward and dived overboard as another volley of cannonballs flew through the air. The sea ran red. Shark fins sliced through the water, looking to feast on the dead and dying. Kit swam strong as a monster of a great white brushed past him, pulled elsewhere by the overwhelming scent of spilt blood. Another, smaller shark swam around him and decided to try and nibble. However, a powerful hit to the nose sent it on its way. As Kit clambered up the side of his father's ship, the sharks began their feeding frenzy. As if the sharks were a similitude of the fight above, relentlessly the two factions tore at each other like beasts, scratching and clawing for dominance. Seeing his son safe on his own deck, Christopher began to respond with more fury than before. For every hole the pirates carved into Christopher's hull, they returned two that carved theirs. For every volley that came, two were rained upon the other. It wasn't long before Christopher had destroyed the pirates' rudder and burned their sail. Yet these brothers of the Seven Circles came on. Cannon fire rained down upon Christopher's ship, and soon his own sails were ablaze. Despite the flames, the pirates came on. With a solid bump, the ship he stood upon jolted as his and the pirates' ships were connected and fastened tight. Like a tidal wave unchecked, an onslaught of men came pouring over the sides. They came on with inhuman horrors, brutal for the sake of savagery. Their scimitars cleaved swiftly and viciously. Yet Christopher would have nothing of it. He would not give up his ship. He saw his son take up the sword against the scimitar and smiled grimly to himself. Dropping his captain's coat to the deck, to give his arms more maneuverability, he launched himself into the foray, working his practiced arm against those that stood in his way. As he fought his way towards his son, one man stood aloof, watching him, the one man that was Christopher's equal, Kabbai Singh. Laughing out loud, Kabbai exclaimed, "At last, a worthy foe!" Meanwhile, like an unwavering oak, Christopher stood against the onslaught, his well-practiced sword singing in his mighty arm as he parted those scurvy dogs like Moses did the sea. Kabbai stepped forward, his opponent elected. As he approached the captain, he scooped up the discarded coat and wore it on his smaller frame, showing his contempt for Christopher's authority and as a means to infuriate and unnerve his opponent. Whether friend or foe, all were threshed before his wrath as he approached the one man that he deemed worthy to fight him. Kit moved forward to help his father, but as Kabbai locked swords with Christopher, the sails fell, veiling them in flames. The heat of the fire was too intense to move forward, and other pirates continued to steal his attention as engagement after engagement wore on him. Yet, through the flames and scorched sailcloth, he could make out the two engaged swords, parrying, striking, blocking. The rest of Christopher's crew had been dispatched, or in the process of the same, as more pirates went through the ship and stripped it of its goods, tossing overboard anything they deemed unimportant, so as to make certain nothing was gone through twice. Gone were Christopher's riches, his personal chests tossed into the boiling sea. Yet the fight continued, each a master of his own weapon, each equalled in skill and strength, the one fighting for the destruction of evil, the other attempting to promote the opposite. The deck itself began to burn as the two continued in their eternal quest, each knowing that the outcome of this fight would decide both their fates. Then, whether by fate or providence, Christopher's foot fell through a burned portion of the deck, the wood splintering beneath, fire dropping onto the powder kegs below. Kit looked up in time to see Kabai's final thrust as Kabai dropped his sword through Christopher's neck. His father continued to thrust as life slipped from him, yet both opponents knew his time had come. As Kit's father slumped down, eyes wide as death approached, the Sing released the weapon and turned his back from the man as if he were of lesser caliber, not staying long enough even to see if Christopher's body had hit the deck. The flames continued to climb, but Kit didn't care. Leaving his sword in the pirate he had just dispatched, he hurried forward, ignoring the flames that were steadily climbing around him. Unknown to him, time itself was done with the fight, and like a pestilence, the inferno raging on the main deck had swept through the remainder of the ship, infecting the hull, the boards, and the powder kegs. As Kit ran and jumped through the flames, he snatched up his father's sword, and with a wild cry of revenge, he lunged himself at the retreating form of Kabai Singh and buried the sword in his back. At that moment, the powder kegs exploded, the ship blew apart into 1,000 pieces, and Kit was thrown into the sea.